Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This next episode is definitely one of the more interesting episodes that I have recorded so far. My guest, Hince, has this pretty incredible ability to use her focused awareness to go to tension that she is storing inside of her body and physically release them that causes then structural changes. So she's been able to adjust her neck. So now it's a lot straighter than it used to be. She's grown half an inch at the age of 55, and she's able to truly tap into these emotional centers where she might be storing some tension and then release them that causes then these different physical attributes to show themselves. And so I really hope everybody enjoys, and I know you will. If somebody were to come up to you and say, "Who are you and why should I listen?" what would you tell them?
Well, the reason I would say people listen is because of just the last couple of years, right? My x-rays that show the changes that I didn't know were possible before. Yeah. So, but that's the end of the story, right? The beginning is the trauma that I had in childhood and, not realizing how much it was stuck inside of me. And I think you're familiar with that concept. But it wasn't until I was in my late 30s I actually realized that it was stuck inside of me. And I started doing something about it. And then my awareness just got deeper and deeper and deeper, so that now I can put my awareness inside my body and release tension held in the connective tissue simply with focused awareness. And that's made some amazing changes.
So talking, I guess, more about that, let's dive in right to the end, right at the beginning, because I'm a firm believer that time doesn't even exist to begin with. It's more of just a construct that we use to make sense of the world. So how would you explain that to somebody? So you've been able to shift the way that your bones are structured?
Shift the bones themselves, right? Okay. So I have that evidence from orthodontic x-rays, right? I knew things were shifting myself. I could feel them relax right in my head, which felt really good, but I didn't really know how much it shifted until I got x-rays taken, just regular orthodontic x-rays. And I had ones from 2013, and then I had the ones from 2021, and could see that my eye sockets had aligned, right? I didn't even know that was possible. My jaw was way off to the side, and it's more centered. It's not fully straight yet. And my neck is straighter than it's ever been in my life, because I was born with my right foot up against my right shin and my whole body was twisted. So it's untwisting and I'm straightening up, and I've actually grown 3/4 of an inch. Since we don't measure ourselves much once we become adults, right? Yeah. I can't remember when I was last at my regular height, which was 5'4.25". Right now I'm 5'5". Okay. And that is because I've been releasing that burden, that tension that's stored inside of me, so that I can become more of my natural height. Yeah.
So these have been, I guess, sort of, I don't want to say problems. Problem's the wrong word for this, but basically the way that when your neck was sideways, that's since you were a child, that's been the case, or did that develop over time into childhood and then just kind of stay for a while?
No, pretty much the earliest photos I have of myself, I have a very bent neck. But, I didn't have a lot of awareness. I didn't have the awareness of how it was affecting me. Yeah. And I know there's a connection now between your ability to move your neck and the perspectives that we have, right? The perspectives that we can see from. It's very much physical is connected to the mental. And so I can see from many different perspectives now that I couldn't before because I was stuck.
Yeah. And so you think that it's basically tension that you carry from emotional tension that then manifests itself into the physical?
Right. It's stored in our physical body in the connective tissue, I believe, because that's what I can feel release. But I didn't know that early on, right? I was just working with the memories and the emotions, and as I did more and more, I became more aware at a deeper level. So I became aware that it was tension held in the connective tissue.
Yeah. So for you, I guess, where did a lot of that tension and I guess stem from? Like, why was it there to begin with from what you've been able to gather after being able to release it?
Well, we all have it, whether we know we do or not, right? So I had a lot of big traumas. I was adopted, so that was big trauma. my parents were alcoholics. That was a big trauma. I was sent to a boys' boarding school. I was the only girl boarder at a boys' boarding school for a year, and I was teased mercilessly. So that was a trauma. I was in the car when my dad ran over a girl's ankle, which was kind of a trauma too.
Yeah.
And I found my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19. So that was a big trauma. But it's not only those big traumas, it's the little traumas. It's that programming that we get. Mm-hmm. So much of it is stored inside of us and we're not aware of it. So that was the origins, but it wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I actually had something happen that made me realize. And there was a business altercation with a couple of other mothers at my boys' school. And mm-hmm. they told me I'd done something wrong. And they were very self-confident, self-assured, authority-type women. And I was this scared mother on the inside, and they told me I'd done something wrong. Mm-hmm. And my mind just spun out of control. It just spun around and around over what they'd said, what I'd said, and what I did, what I could have done different, but I didn't do. Mm-hmm. And it was 3 days of that. And at the end of those 3 days, I realized, okay, this is not normal.
Yeah.
People shouldn't react this way. And I realized, okay, it feels a little bit like how I would react when my dad would tell me I'd done something wrong. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I realized, oh, maybe something from my childhood is still affecting me to this day.
Yeah. So from there, what was your first step to I guess, realizing there's something wrong and then trying to do something about it?
Well, that was when I realized there was something wrong, but I didn't know what to do at that point. Yeah. But it was in that time frame I went to a doctor's appointment, and he was a holistic physician. So he had more tools in his toolbox than most physicians. And he also knew me from outside of the doctor's office. He was a parent at the school. And he recognized I was more stressed than I should be. And he asked me on a scale of 0 to 10 what my stress level was. And I said 8. And then he asked me the question, why? And that's when I realized, I was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19, which is now 2 decades earlier. Because the tears from that event was still just under the surface all these years later. And he happened to know this technique that's called EFT, which is short for emotional freedom technique. It's also called tapping, because we're tapping on our body as we're talking something through. And he tapped with me about my mother's death for about 15 minutes. And I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story of her death in my mind for the first time ever without the tears there. Yeah. And that's when I realized, okay, something's different.
What's the difference for you, I guess, between being able to now like tell that story? So like clearly that still happened and it's still there, but the emotions are not there. So is it like, can you still feel that the emotions were there at one point, or is it simply just like emotionless now?
Yeah, it's just like a story now. Right? Yeah. But that 15-minute session didn't clear the whole thing. It cleared the top layers of the emotions, right? And it opens up the subconscious mind. So over the next few weeks, right, more details of the event popped into my mind. And then I would work with those and release those. And so I'd have to do it layer by layer until the whole event was cleared out. Gotcha.
So after that first session, did you then work with somebody else to help you continue on EFT, or was it purely you just taking it upon yourself, being like, "Hey, fuck it, I'm going to do this"?
Yeah, well, you have to be willing to be vulnerable to work with someone else, and I was not. So I needed to do it myself, but I wasn't necessarily sure that EFT was as powerful as that one session, so I wanted to try it out. So I went home, I learned everything I could about it because it was given away for free by Gary Craig, who developed it. So I learned everything I could, and then I wanted to try it out. And I had a 17-year-old cat at home at the time, and his kidneys were starting to fail. And we were told we had to give him a daily saline shot, like an injection of saline. First time I gave him that shot, my hand was shaking so badly. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it every day. It was just too stressful. So I tried it out. I tapped on every aspect of it. So I tapped about my hand shaking. I tapped about my fear of hurting my cat. And I tapped about all the memories from all the injections I'd had from living around the world. And the next day when I gave him the shot, the needle just slid right in. All that fear that had been living inside of me the day before had totally disappeared. So that's when I realized how powerful EFT was. And that's where I realized I wanted to be on the other side of that fear. I wanted to be in that peaceful place about everything in my life. So that's when I started using it daily.
Got it. So it's about, from, I guess, like my understanding, it's like once you feel, I guess, sort of like the initial, let's call it a response to something that's happening. Like, I'm about to do this, so therefore, like, I'm feeling anxious. It's thinking about that. And then if you're able to tap into that, that then allows you to go a layer deeper to, well, here was a time in your past where you felt anxious in a similar situation, and just keep peeling back layer by layer by layer until you get to, I guess, whatever like the first initial time was where you felt that emotion.
You can do that. They're all connected together. So even if you don't go backwards in time, you can just work with the current feeling, right? So if I'm feeling anxious or fearful or anything, I can tap on that right now, or I can do it after the fact, right? If I reacted to something during the day and I realized later on in the day, oh, look, I was actually getting angry at that, then you can go back to that and tap on that. Now, memories might pop up from the past as to a previous time you felt that way, or they may not. But even just working on the current emotion will release a layer. And that's what I kept doing, right? Because it's not easy to begin with to even notice when you're getting emotional, right? Because we get so caught up in those emotions.
Yeah.
But it gets easier over time. Like the more you catch yourself, then you can work on it in the moment. And then the next time you don't react as fast. So that's what I noticed. I started becoming less reactionary, which was really nice. But I wanted it to go faster. I wanted more to happen faster. I was determined to change. So I wrote down every emotional memory I could think of from my childhood. Right? All the big traumas, all the little traumas, all the sayings that people would say, like shame on you, and all those different things that I experienced in childhood. And I tapped through one each night for about an hour to an hour and a half each night until I'd gone through them all. And that's when I really felt shifts happening. I felt different, totally different.
How long did that take to write down every single, thing that you could possibly think of, and then tap on it like every single night? Like that had to have taken years.
Well, it was months,
okay.
And I'd remember something else and I'd add it to the bottom of the list. But yeah, it was really powerful. And what I realized EFT was doing over time was it was opening up the subconscious mind. And along with that, the awareness expands, and it kind of expands into our body.
Yeah.
So to begin with, I wasn't really aware of how I felt during the day. Right? But as I did more and more tapping, I became aware of my emotions during the day. And then I became aware at a deeper level of the physical sensations underneath the emotions.
Got it. So it's, I guess I would kind of consider that like conscious awareness of not letting your emotions essentially control what you're doing, just simply just being aware that they're there.
Right. But there's the aware of the emotions themselves, right? And we use words for that, right? We'll use, I'm afraid, or I'm frustrated, or I'm sad. But what we're really describing is where we're holding tension in our body, right? If we're feeling frustrated, I can feel that is tension across my solar plexus.
Yeah.
Now, it took work to become aware at that level, right? That's a deeper level of awareness.
Yeah.
So once I was aware at that level, I didn't feel like I needed to use EFT as much. I used what I call feeling your feelings.
Yeah.
And I suspect you're somewhat familiar with this.
I would be familiar with that. I want to talk definitely more about how tension manifests itself into essentially like physical ailments, and I'll go into the reason why I'm very curious about that. So I've always had a lot of tension that I know I hold like up in my neck and in my upper back. That's, basically feels like pain. Like I can't move my neck to the side as much as I'd like to be able to do. And when I just recently went to Peru to do ayahuasca, I told the curandera about the pain, and she put some plant stuff on the back of it, and then said during that night's ceremony to think about it. And when I was in that ceremony, it felt like physically there was tension that was just lifting from my body as I was going through, all of the different things that the ayahuasca was making me think of. But I could feel that tension releasing at that point. And then after that ceremony, I had the most movement in my neck that I had ever had for, the last however many years it was. And so I didn't know exactly what the tension was, though, or what it stemmed from. Like, it didn't allow me to go that deep just in that short period of time. It was more just telling me that this is tension here and it is in your mind. It is not physical. It was just letting me know that, because then 2 weeks later, the tension's back again. And the tension's still back now. But just for that short period of time, like it was so clear to me that, okay, like this isn't something that's physically wrong with me. This is something that I absolutely have the power to release myself through whatever sort of, modality that there is, be it plant medicine, be it EFT, be it meditation. But it was just such a strong sensation that I had in that moment that allowed me to. And I don't really know exactly where I was going with this, but I want to talk to you about, like, how are you able to feel the, I guess, emotional tension that manifests itself into physical things? Like, when was the first time that you felt that?
Okay, I want to come back to what you just said.
Okay.
Your story for a moment.
Yeah.
So what you did was it released a layer.
Mm-hmm.
It released a layer of that tension, and then you came back to it, right? So it's just like me saying that with the story with my mother, right? I tapped through one layer, and then the things bubbled up again. So that's where the tension came back into you. So I do believe it is physical, and you released some of that tension. It's like one of those balls of rubber bands, right? You cut through one rubber band, and then the tension is taken up by the next ones. And then you cut through those, it's taken up by the next one. So you release that surface rubber band, right? And now you're aware of the tension still there, but it's a deeper layer that's there.
Yeah.
And it takes more work. So if you were doing that with EFT, which is using the words more, right? You would tap about this tension. I've got this tension. I can feel this tension in my shoulders.
Yeah.
Right? And you would use the words to focus your mind on that tension, which is what you were doing with ayahuasca when you were feeling that tension.
Yeah.
So, but then it gets deeper, right? So once you become, I kind of need to finish my story a little bit in order to understand.
For sure. Go.
So I became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions. Then I started to just feel them, right? I would sit in that feeling, whatever it was. So it might be fear, and allow it to be felt, because we're so used to suppressing all those feelings. And my body was absolutely used to not feeling, right? To pushing those feelings away, pushing them inside, just plugging them down. So it took a while to actually teach myself just to allow myself to sit in the feeling of fear or regret or guilt or shame. Those feelings, just sit in them. It's not comfortable to do, but it's really just stuck energy. It's energy that's stuck in the body, wants to release, and we just have to find a way to do it. So EFT works with that.
Yeah.
Then the feelings works at a slightly deeper level. And I just kept doing this every day. I noticed when I was feeling something, and I would just sit in that feeling and just relax into it and allow it to shift. Like the energy just needs to leave the body.
Yeah.
And I would do this over and over again. And in the evenings, I would do this instead of the tapping on my childhood stuff, which I've done now. I would just feel collective traumas, something like 9/11 or the Loma Prieta earthquake I was in California. Just bring that memory to mind. Feel all the emotions around it, which are then physical sensations, and allow it to shift. At some point during that process, one day, I realized I could keep my awareness inside my body after the tension had dissipated, which felt very different. It was nothing I had experienced before. I knew it was different, but I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, imagine you've got a toothache or a stomach ache, right? You can sense. Now that's the key thing. You're sensing, you're not thinking, right? You're feeling where that pain is in the tooth or the stomach. But once the tension has gone, the pain is gone, you can't put your awareness back inside again. You can't find with your senses where that pain was coming from. I found I could do that. And so I started to play around with it, and I would do it, and I could find a place that had tension. I would find physical tension, hold my awareness on it, and I would notice it would shift a little bit and it would release. So then I would do it over and over again. And I realized what I was doing was exactly the same now at a deeper level than feeling the feelings, and a deeper level still than EFT. It's exactly the same thing, but the awareness is now deep inside, and I know that it's physical tension stored in the connective tissue, right? So it's all connected together. You can just access it through different ways the deeper you go.
Gotcha. I'm just thinking of my personal experiences and back to sort of like feeling your feelings. So you had mentioned when you first said that I probably know something about that, because that's what plant medicine allows me to do more so than I've ever been able to do when I'm not in that mode, is just that concept of literally feeling your feelings. Because you are right. I think most people go about their lives trying to suppress everything because we think we should be feeling a certain way. And so once you have that mindset of I should be feeling a certain way, you're not actually allowing yourself to feel whatever is actually there. And
totally.
Getting to that realization takes so much more work than it should, because it's not something that we're ever taught to do. So I mean when you were a child, and I guess sort of whatever traumas came up, and let's say when you were first the only girl at an all boys boarding school, I'm assuming nobody ever told you that, hey, like, it's okay that you feel really left out right now. I'm assuming they probably told you something like, you kind of need to just suck it up and deal with it.
Don't think they said anything.
Okay, got it. So they didn't even give a shit.
Right.
So it's feeling that and going back to, I think we think that we should feel certain ways. Like we tell ourselves that, if I just get this job, this promotion, or, I'm whatever, I should feel good about this because I've accomplished it. But like, it's telling ourselves that we should feel that way based off of society's way of programming us, telling us that we should feel like it's not really us at the end of the day. And therefore it's just, honestly, it just gets fucking confusing. Like, I don't know what's me anymore. Like where I end and where the other programming begins, like it gets really confusing.
It does. And the toxic positivity we hear about these days, right? Yeah. That's exactly the same thing. We think we should be thinking something that we're not thinking. Mm-hmm. So, but really my whole journey has been about finding my truth in each moment. And when we fully accept it, right, whether it's words, whether it's a story of something that happened, whether it's a feeling we're having, or whether it's tension on the inside, as soon as there is absolute acceptance of that, that's when the shift happens. Yeah. Right. So if I'm feeling really sad right now, I want to accept that I'm feeling that. Right. So if I'm using EFT or a tap on, I'm feeling really sad right now. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Siri popped up. She thought I was feeling sad.
And I bet that she wanted to do something immediately to make you not feel sad, which is wrong.
That's right. Yeah, but it is. But you're right. You're totally right. We actually have to accept. Actually, finding our truth is not easy because we are so used to suppressing it, right? So that's what I was saying earlier. So really finding our truth. And for me, it took getting as deep as realizing that I hated myself. So I actually tapped for hours over a period of weeks on I hate myself until the attachment to that thought or that belief had disappeared and they were just words.
Yeah. That's funny that you bring that up, because that's from my most recent experience with ayahuasca. It's revealed itself to me, not at that moment, but over time, that that's the underlying thing, is that I actually hate myself. And that's still, even now when I say it out loud, I think there's still part of me that's still trying to suppress that a little bit. Like I know I haven't reached that full level of acceptance yet. And there was all this shame and guilt that I still hold on to, that I've let go quite a bit of it. And I know that for sure, but I know there's still more at the surface. And I think that's why the tension has come back to me, is because it's hard to do that every single night. Like every single day, just feel like shit, essentially. Like, no, we don't want to feel like shit. Like, even though I know that I'm going to feel better at some point it's like, oh my God, this is fucking exhausting.
Or maybe EFT would be a good way of helping along, right? Because you would feel like shit, right? You would feel those feelings and tap. And I've realized it's the physical aspect of tapping on those meridian points that helps it release faster from the body.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if you're not used to actually just sitting in it. Sitting in it can be hard if we're resisting it. And the tapping allows us to relax into it more.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, I mean, how long is this shift taken from when you, I guess, first started to being able to sense inside of your body? Or, I mean, you control how you feel that inside of your body, like after the physical sensation is even gone. Like, how long did that take you from the beginning to that point?
Well, I started when I was probably about 38 and I'm 56 now.
Okay.
So it took years. I've probably been able to put my awareness inside my body for maybe 5 years or so.
Okay.
But life improves, right? It's a journey for sure, right? Mm-hmm. But it gets easier as you go. And to me, it's almost exponential, right? The amount I can release in a day now compared to, 2-3 years ago is massive. So life gets easier, life gets more fun. You actually become aware at a deeper level, and that awareness is reflected on the outside as well. So you can see energy interplay. You can see things happening on the outside. You can see where other people are holding tension, where they're not breathing correctly. You can see other things. So there's actually a depth to life that I didn't know existed before.
Yeah. And so I know one thing that you believe is that we're essentially bound to repeat our patterns from childhood until we go back and basically feel those feelings that came up and feel those emotions. But until we process it, we're going to keep repeating the exact same patterns throughout our life, correct?
Right. And it's not the exact same events, right? Yeah. It's the feelings that get stored in us. They're part of our signal. So it's the feeling complex is the signal. We'll emit that signal, we'll attract it back into our future, and we'll feel that same way again through some different events. But it's just that feeling that keeps replaying. So that's what you want to catch. You want to catch how you're reacting and that feeling that you're feeling inside. Yeah. And work with that. And then that changes things. And then you become aware at a deeper and deeper level, right? So now I'm watching the news. Okay, so how do I feel when I'm listening to some story on the news? Because it's more distant from me, right? It's not in my close surroundings. Vicinity. It's not my family. It's a little more distant, so it's a little deeper inside. So I will feel how I feel when certain politicians are talking. Right? How does that make me feel inside? What does that bring up inside of me? And then I work with that feeling and release that.
Gotcha. So what do you, one thing that you, I guess, kind of mentioned was the law of attraction. Like, how do you describe the law of attraction?
Yeah, I don't describe, a lot of people talk about it in terms of just thoughts. Okay. It's definitely not just thoughts. I think of the whole of us as a signal. Everything about us, right? It's our gender, it's our size, it's our shape, it's our hair, it's our clothes, and it becomes obvious, right? If you think about it, if you shave your hair off and you go out into the public, you will get a different reaction than you had before. Right? Yes, you are emitting a different signal. Yeah. So what I realized over time is the biggest part of that signal is the tension stored inside from our past. Yeah. And I didn't know that until I put my awareness inside my head. Right? I'd been working in my body for a while, releasing tension in the connective tissue. Eventually, after many, many months, I got my awareness inside my head. And that was massive because there was so much pain and tension. The forces pulling my bones out of alignment were huge. I mean, I can't describe how big they were. And they had been there all along, my whole life. But I had not become aware of them until that point. Like, so I know we hold a lot of tension, right? You've got that in your shoulders. And a lot of the time you're probably not aware of it, but it's still there. Yeah. And it's affecting us.
Yeah. Like, I know that I can, if I'm caught up in a moment or something, like I'm not feeling the tension in my shoulders at that point. But then once I start to settle back down and basically just do nothing again, then I could feel like it just starts creeping back up on me. And, it's again, it's not that physical sensation in that moment. It's something from the past that I just haven't dealt with that caused it. I mean, so do you think that it was essentially a certain event that happened in my past, or just a certain feeling that then immediately manifested itself into, okay, when you feel like this is going to go into your shoulders?
Okay. So what I think it is in childhood, we're told something, right? Something, or we see something and we have a facial expression.
Mm-hmm.
We don't feel we can express what we're thinking. So we hold it inside. So we hold that tension through that facial expression, which is facial, right? The word facial connected to fascia, which is connective tissue, somewhat. And that tension was probably something to do with shoulders, right?
Yeah.
That facial expression. And then that's then part of your signal. And you will replay that over and over again, and it gets established and sits in your shoulders.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it might take some work. So I do think it's physical.
Yeah.
Right. There is a physical aspect to it. It's connected to memory and emotion, and you'll want to work with it over and over. And it sometimes takes time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when you, I guess, bouncing back again to, we're going to just continue to, relive patterns and stuff. So that's part of like, everything happens for a reason. You believe that, correct?
Yeah, not a reason. There's no blame involved.
Okay.
Right? It's just we get programmed in childhood. That's those first years of life are when we get programmed. Our signal gets established.
Yeah.
Right? You were told something or did something, saw something, and you had that facial expression. It stored that tension inside of you.
Yeah.
And it's part of your signal. So now you emit that signal. It attracts back into your future.
How fucked up is that?
But then that's the game. So you've got to find where you're reacting. You've got to feel those feelings, got to release that tension, and then carry on with life, find the next one. And eventually you don't react as much anymore. You're just calm, you're peaceful inside, and you're just watching for the next thing. It becomes more of a game.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so like, if that's the game is figuring out kind of what it was and then releasing it and then figuring out the next one. What's the end goal of this game? What after you've done it all, after you've released everything from your past, are you just sitting there waiting for something to happen in the future just so you could do it again?
Well, that's kind of fun. Okay, so let's go there. So what I realized, because I've released so much tension in my head, I got to the place that I know I'm looking inside of my body. I'm looking from one place to another inside of my body. Mm-hmm. So I know I'm not my body. Right? Yeah. I have to be inhabiting my body, because otherwise I couldn't see from one place to another. So I believe that's the soul. Okay. I think the soul inhabits the connective tissue. I think that tension stored in our connective tissue is how our ego manifests. Mm-hmm. Right, I believe. So we tune into spirits, but that signal that we're tuning into is distorted by our ego, by the tension held in the connective tissue. So we're not tuning into spirit as well as we could be. So this work releases that tension, and I believe that's what ayahuasca may be doing. It's not doing it the same way. I believe it's actually making the soul very uncomfortable. So it's partially leaving the body. Yeah. And as it's doing that, it's releasing those adhesions and the connective tissue. And then you come back in. Right? I think that's what happened after a couple of weeks. You were back in your body.
That was the exact experience I had on the third night, was which was the same night that the tension left and everything. At the very end of it, I was in this very, very weird trance-like state that I have never been in my entire life before, where like it felt like I was just like, my whole body just felt like it was kind of floating. Like it was a weird out-of-body experience, and it literally felt like I had like transcended human existence for a small period of time, and then 3 hours later was right back into my body. And like I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't awake, I was just like out of human existence is the best way that I can describe it, and I still have no idea how. And then when I woke up, I was like, what the fuck just happened? It was so confusing. But that's gave me the belief, the same I think belief that you were just talking about, is our soul is just essentially having this existence inside of this body. Like, I am not this body. I am truly what's inside of it and experiencing life through this body.
Right. Now, I believe that ayahuasca and those types of things and this work are totally opposite. Right. I believe with the ayahuasca, you're kind of leaving the body somewhat. This work that I've been doing is very much bringing me into my body.
Interesting.
Right? So it's somewhat different.
So go on. I was going to say, I would kind of argue that because in order for that sort of end goal to happen of me leaving my body, in order for that to happen, I had to go so deep inward in order to then have that outward experience. So on the second night,
right, because I think we come in and out through our pineal gland, maybe. When I'm looking inside, I'm looking from somewhere in the center of my head. Could be the pineal gland. And I think that's probably what you had to do, is go to that depth in order to release.
I had to go so physically inward to the point where the ayahuasca was making me feel other physical pain that I didn't normally feel before. Like, I had terrible pain in my stomach that I was basically like, okay, I need to purge, because that's a big part of the process. And all I was focusing on was trying to purge rather than feeling the fucking discomfort that was there. And long story short, after about 4 hours, the facilitators were like, hey, dummy, stop trying to purge it out and just sit with the discomfort. I was like, oh, okay. They were obviously a lot nicer than that, but that was that was what I felt at the time, was like, oh fuck, that's good advice. And once I finally just sat there and was just feeling the physical pain, and then it slowly started releasing. And once I got to the pain is basically stemming from emotions of shame and guilt. And then I was just focusing on literally just feeling as much shame and guilt as I possibly could, until the pain finally came out and I was finally able to purge it out. And I was feeling, self-forgiveness and treat myself with grace. So in just a whole roundabout way to teach me this overarching lesson, which was, again, a great lesson. But now I think here's where the EFT, or basically what we call integration, comes into play. Is you don't just learn that lesson one time and it's fucking over. You're going to keep repeating these same patterns until you actually release all of it.
Yeah. So isn't that interesting? Because your experience sounds somewhat along the lines of people who've had near-death experiences, right? They do that kind of life review. They feel those feelings from their point of view and from other points of view.
Yeah.
So yes, that sounds very similar. And one of the things Jesus said was something along the lines of to die before you die. Right. And I think that's what this work is, right? We're going through, we're feeling those feelings that are stuck inside of us, and we're allowing them to release. Yeah. And I've got to the point now that I will go back to memories and I will review them, not only from my point of view, but from the point of view of everyone else who was in that scene. I will sit inside of their experience and I will tap or whatever. Yeah. From that aspect as well, which I believe is doing that work of dying before you die. Right. Yeah. So then I imagine, I don't know clearly, but the death experience will be slightly different, because we won't have to go through as many of those feelings because we've already done that work. Yeah.
So what's interesting about that death experience is there's the jury's still technically out on this, but there's evidence that DMT is released inside of mammals' brains right when we're about to die. Ayahuasca is DMT. So that's why those experiences, from when people describe them, always sound very, very similar, because they might quite literally be the exact same experience that you're going through at that time. And a lot of people then also say that very experienced meditators are able to reach that state where they can naturally release that DMT inside of that brain. And I know what you do. You don't consider meditation, correct?
Correct. Some people do.
Yeah. So, I mean, because if I were just hearing you describe what you're doing, I think it just sounds like incredibly, incredibly deep meditation. So where do you see that difference?
Well, I think a lot of people, when they're talking about meditation, they're talking about using their mind. Right? They're trying to quiet their mind, or they're trying to imagine something. I'm in my senses. I'm sensing, I'm feeling. So there are types of meditation like Vipassana meditation, which does somewhat similar things. I can do it now. And when I say do it, I mean, I can focus on the inside, feel tension, allow it to release. I can do that with my eyes open. I can be walking, I can be watching TV, I can be, in bed, sleeping or not sleeping. Well, I guess I have to be awake, but lying down, I can have my eyes open or not, and I can do it. So it doesn't look like I'm meditating. I'm just simply, but I'm not in my thinking mind. I'm just feeling.
Yeah.
So my mind is very quiet, right? Because I'm not thinking. But so, some people could call that meditation. I don't generally.
Yeah.
It feels more active to me because I'm feeling things release. Like I can feel and hear adhesions and the connective tissue release, right? I know things are changing. My neck will crack and pop and all sorts of things are going on, but I know it's changing things deeply.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about that. So I've tried meditating in the past and was just unable to understand it. And it wasn't until after I did ayahuasca and felt the concept of feeling my feelings and just feeling the discomfort, not sensing it, that after I came back from that, now I've been able to meditate every single day. And with my meditation practice, I guess it takes part of Vipassana where, feeling my head, feeling my forehead, feeling my cheeks, and just kind of scanning my body. But through that scan, that then allows me to then feel the tension that's in there, or, feel deeper what's there. Not necessarily just doing that to just like sit there, but then I'm able to feel what it is that's actually bothering me. So if I'm feeling anxious, that part of the meditation is just to quiet my mind to begin with. So then I could focus on, okay, I have this anxiety and there's this pain that's in my back right now. And then basically just sitting there and feeling that and not doing anything really about it other than just sitting and feeling it.
Okay. That's what I do. So I will find the place that has the most tension. I will sit with the feeling, just feel it and feel it until I feel a shift. And then I will go back and do it again and again and again. And it feels really good. I mean, releasing tension that's been stored in the body for decades, it's got to feel good, right? And it does.
Yes, it does sometimes, but like it's hard for me to sit there and feel until my mind then starts to take over. Like my mind eventually, after I'm sitting there and feeling something for, let's call it 10 minutes even, my mind is then going to start to come in, and then those thoughts are going to come back, and like I'll just have trouble focusing again. Is that, the ego basically just being so uncomfortable with feeling it because we're not used to it? Like that's why that's happening?
Yes, it can be. But you can also then accept the thoughts, right? If you were tapping, if you were doing it with tapping, it's like, okay, what's the thought I'm thinking? And I would just accept it because there's energy underneath the thought.
Got it.
Right.
So they're coming with a purpose.
Right. Yes. And that's finding your truth, right? It's not wanting to push them away.
It's telling me I need to feel those too.
Right. That's kind of what meditation does. It kind of pushes the thoughts away, right? Some forms of meditation.
Yeah. Some forms are.
Yeah. Whereas this path has been accepting them along the way, right?
Observing without judgment.
Because once you've done that enough, they don't come back up. Right. I got to the place where I realized those thoughts that I used to have that were so judgmental and critical, they were just thoughts that had been programmed into me by my dad in childhood. And they stopped showing up in my mind, which was so fun.
Yeah. Do you now then, I guess, consciously see if something were to happen that normally would have brought that feeling? Are you able to just see right away, like, oh, there it is, but it just doesn't affect you anymore? Like, do you still even notice those things that show up in your life, or do they just not even show up anymore?
I think a lot of them don't show up anymore, and those thoughts just don't come. So I think I see different things. I don't think I focus or notice things that I used to notice.
Gotcha. So you're able to just more so, I guess, see in a way that just doesn't cause you tension to begin with. Whereas before you could see the same event, and what you would focus on would be that thing that would then cause that tension. Whereas now when you see it, that just doesn't even come to mind because you've already released all of that. So therefore you're not attracting that through your signal. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I remember one day opening my kitchen door, right? And I said to myself, it just feels like I'm living in a different reality.
Yeah.
My mind was different. I'd never experienced a peaceful mind before. I probably had as an infant, but I couldn't remember experiencing one before. And it's like, it just felt so different to me.
Yeah. So what can somebody do right now if they have, know that they have tension or know that they have a super active mind? What's the first step that you would tell them to do in order to start being able to release this tension?
Start noticing, right? Start noticing during the day and, saying to yourself, oh, look at me, right? Look at me. I'm starting to react, or I'm getting frustrated. I'm getting angry. So disconnect from getting involved with the emotions so much. Just start looking at it from a distance. That's the first thing. And if you're willing to learn EFT, it's very easy to learn. I've got a video on my YouTube channel. I think that covers pretty much everything you need to know about it. You just then need to practice it. I know it looks a little weird, go into the bathroom and do it when no one can see you. But it's very powerful.
Gotcha. Well, Anne, thank you so much for having an awesome conversation. And I don't know, just being so open and giving so many tips. And I really, really appreciate it. And hope everybody else enjoys it as well. I guess you have any, parting words before we go?
One thing I'd just quickly like to come back to that we never got to quite was the future, right? Where does this take you? Where does this take you, right? It takes you deeper and deeper into the body, right? So the end points, I don't exactly know when, where, what it's going to be, but I'm getting deeper into my skull now, right? And I recognize symbology outside of us. I happen to know now that churches and cathedrals are three-dimensional skulls. So the place inside a church is the altar, right? That's the focal point. So where is that inside the skull? I believe it's the sphenoid sinus in the sphenoid bone. And at some point, I'll be able to get inside of there with my focused awareness. And then who knows? We'll see what happens.
And then basically, I mean, it's uncharted waters. You have no idea until you know. Like that's kind of the point. Is what we were talking about earlier. It's about experiencing that.
Right. And the depths to life that there is that we really don't know yet.
Yeah, we're humans that are simply just we're spirit signals, whatever you want to call it, that are inhabiting these bodies in order to experience life. And if you have that awareness, it's hard to be sad. I'll say that. Since I've gotten that awareness and I guess that, thoughts that I understand, it's that like, even when I'm really, really sad, I'm like, well, damn, it's really, really cool that I can feel so sad right now. Like, this is something that I guess, I chose to do at some point. Like I wanted to come into this body and I wanted to experience these feelings. So, I might as well experience the full depth of them.
That's right. And you can tap on feeling sad and accept the sadness and allow that energy that's stuck inside to release. Yeah. For sure. I can't bring up tears the way I used to. I mean, I used to cry pretty easily, but now it's so hard to bring up tears. So
interesting.
Absolutely. We can change ourselves.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Anne. And I will be linking to your book. I'll be linking to your YouTube channel. And then anything else that you want in the footnotes of this podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the great conversation.
Absolutely. Bye. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and thank you again to Anne for coming on the podcast. If you enjoyed that episode, please follow, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a review. We appreciate everybody's support, and feel free to share it with a friend or with a colleague or with anybody that you think might find that interesting as well. And we'll see you next week.